Okay, we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming and participating. I want to share something which I actually saw on Hamayan's WhatsApp a while ago to start. I thought it was very appropriate to start with this, and that is a Swedish professor's suggestion. David, you probably remember this. A Swedish professor says that, due to global warming and climate change and the scarcity of meat, so she suggested that what we've got to start getting used to and stop being so disgusted by it is human meat. Okay, this was at a recent conference, scientific conference in Europe. And I'm like, wow, yeah, it's good for the environment. You won't need the animals. When people are dead anyway, you can have their meat, and it's a win-win for everyone. So here we have a intelligent lady who, in pursuit of doing good, has come to this decision. And it's quite amazing. You could be so open-minded. Oh, there we are. Thank you. You could be so open-minded that your brains can fall out. So now what we see there in that little anecdote, that news piece, and the same thing we see in many of the struggles today, is there's a question in the world, in society, about the value. Is there value to the human body? Okay, so we're talking about someone who passed away already. There's no killing happening. It's just the human body. Is that something that we need to respect even after the person, the soul that was housed in that body, is now departed? So this is actually a very old question, and there's the Greek philosopher Diogenes, who he in general made fun of material pleasures and looking dignified. And when he was asked how he wished to be buried, he left instructions to be thrown outside the city wall so wild animals could feast on his body. When they asked him if he minded, he said, "Not at all. Just provide me with a stick so that I can chase the creatures away." So they said, "How are you going to do that after you're dead?" He replied, "If I lack awareness, then why should I care what happens to me when I am dead?" Okay, so here we have a leading, controversial, but leading Greek philosopher already saying the same point. Who cares? If the person's dead, what does it matter? Let's just be practical. Don't get overly emotional. Think of it just practically. It doesn't matter. And therefore he said, just throw my body out. Now, let's try to find a Torah view. Can anyone think in the Torah, sources or stories, mitzvahs, anything in the Torah that might show this concept of the importance of burial and respect for the dead body? Any ideas?
Well, the mitzvah of not leaving a body hanging overnight,
right?
After there's a death penalty.
Yes, yeah, that's certainly one. Even if someone is a wicked person to the extent that he is put to death, there's still a mitzvah that you're not allowed to leave the body hanging on display overnight. It was the custom in ancient times that when someone was killed, let's say there was a rebel or someone who was killed, they wanted to show an example of him. And therefore they would leave his body out as an example. The Torah says specifically not to do that. And you have to show respect to the person and to his body, even if he is a very bad person. You can't leave the body out. And this actually extends more generally, to the mitzvah of it, there's a mitzvah to bury as quickly as possible on the day, unless there's a special reason, but to bury on the day that the person passes away, or not to leave it hanging. And that's out of respect to the person's body. If there's a special reason, let's say there's family members coming from overseas or whatever, there are certain reasons where sometimes it can be delayed, but in general, and the preference is that to be buried on the day, and it's actually a mitzvah. Okay, that's one. Good. Then we have more. Actually, it starts right near the beginning of the Torah. At the beginning, in Parshat Bereshit, near the beginning of the Torah, right? What do we where do we find a sign for this idea of burial, the importance of burial?
Well, we see that Cain buried Hevel, but question whether he was just trying to cover up the evidence.
Okay.
Similarly, Moshe, I think, covers with sand the Egyptian who he kills.
Right. Yes, good.
But again, possibly he's covering up the evidence. But certainly with our people, we find emphasis on burial. And of course, this being Chayei is the first of those. But with all the avot, the imahot,
you know what? Yeah.
It's all
you know
about
what? I'm gonna move inside. Lady, you want to open the door? Sorry, David. We're going to move inside because rain is getting heavy. Here we go. Okay, yeah. So those are good points. Some of them are definite proofs. Some of them, as you said, may be proofs, but not definite because there may have been other reasons. We do find that the Torah actually says that we should be returned to earth. Sorry, I'm just going inside. The Torah says we should be returned to earth because the Torah says El Afar Tashuv, that we come from the earth, and El Afar Tashuv, we should be returned to the earth. There's a number of other sources. Sorry?
But when Cain said to Hashem, am I my brother's keeper? I think what he was talking about was his duty of care and giving that as a kind of defense when Hashem said, where's your brother? Rather than, he didn't actually lie, he was disingenuous by talking about his duty of care.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's true, and there's a whole discussion about that. But what we're buried, it talks about Hevel's blood crying out from the earth. So we see the concept of burial there. Okay. What other examples can we come up with? Well, there's also, and this is why we're talking about it this week, Avraham spends a huge amount of money for a burial spot. Begins, Chayei, this Parsha, begins with the negotiation over a burial spot, and then the burial of Sarah in this spot in Hebron today. Abraham bought it. You would have thought it's contested. And that's perhaps why he had to buy it, and he didn't try to get the best price. He just wanted to make it as clear as possible that it's his. Now, we find this also when the Yaakov and his family, the Jewish people, end up in Egypt. Yosef is the viceroy. They move to Egypt during the years of famine, and Yaakov is passing away many years later, and he says, please bury me in Eretz Yisrael. Please bury me in Israel. The question is, why does he care where he's buried?
And Yosef,
throw him out. Like, who cares about the burial?
Yosef also
Yosef
gives
does that as
instruction
well.
not to be buried in Egypt.
That's right. Yeah, Yosef does as well, and that the whole story with that, with Moshe.
What he's showing to them is that Egypt is a temporary sojourn. Is Egypt as a home is a temporary illusion, and we're all one day returning to Eretz Yisrael, and so that's where I need to be buried. So I will be with you forever. Besides anything we might want to say about the holiness of Eretz Yisrael and the depths of depravity, who would really want to be buried in the depravity of Egypt?
Holiness of Eretz Yisrael, and that's where we're headed. You know, it says that there's a mitzvah, of course, so there's a big mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. If someone can't live in Eretz Yisrael, then at least there's a nice thing to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, when I say nice thing, what's the best thing you want to hear? You want to be said at your funeral? Oh my, she's still moving, right? You want them to realize, oh, you're actually still alive. Quick, let's get, CPR. But barring that, the best place to be buried is in Eretz Yisrael. I remember, for example, when Rabbi Grona passed away, he instructed in his will that he be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Others here who have done similar.
I guess that's
so we find that Yaakov and Yosef asks to be buried in Israel. Yes. Yeah. The Kohen Gadol, see, we are a religion of life, not a religion of death. Many religions, a lot of their practices, especially ancient religions, were related to talking to the spirits of the dead, and a lot of the religious practices and the priests' involvement was specifically with dead bodies. In Judaism, we're the exact opposite. What do we have? That the Kohen, the priest, is not allowed to have to do with being next to a dead body. It's the exact opposite, right? And that's why, like, on some of my ancestry are Kohanim. My great-grandfather was a Kohen. He's buried in the front row in Springvale, right next to the shtibel there. It's actually the very first spot at Springvale. But why is he there? Because he's a Kohen, so he's in the front so that his descendants are able to go up closer. They still have to stand away 4 amot, 4 cubits away, but they can be close to his, relatively close to his, where he's buried. So the Kohen stays away from all death, but there's one exception. If there's someone who has no one to bury, a Kohen's allowed to become impure for the burial of his immediate family. But a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, can't become impure for anyone, except if there's someone who needs to be buried and there's no one to bury them. And then they're allowed to become impure. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, can become impure to bury someone. So we see how special burial is, that even the high priest becomes impure. The only funeral he can attend is to make sure the person is buried. Okay. So that's a few of the mitzvahs that we see, or examples. We see Hashem saying right at the beginning in Bereshit, you come from earth and you'll go back to earth. Avram spending a fortune, Yaakov and Yosef being buried, Moshe asking to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, Moshe's burial, which we'll come back to later. The Kohen Gadol becomes impure to bury someone, and that you're not allowed to leave someone, even a evil sinner, you can't leave them overnight without burial. Now, we know that there are 10 tests of Abraham, right? In Pirkei Avot, it talks about 10 tests, but it doesn't say what those 10 tests are, right? According to both the Rambam and Rashi, the 10th test, what was Abraham's final test, the most difficult test of Abraham? Right, what was it?
Akedat Yitzchak.
Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak. Oh, but like someone who's present here, Levi says that some say, this is
Finding a wife for Yitzchak.
that some say, okay, some say Rabbi Yonah Girundi says, who had in his commentary on Pirkei Avot, on ethics of our fathers, he says the final test was burying his wife Sarah. And this was, of course, very difficult. It was his wife of many years. They had been married almost, well, they had been married a century, actually. That's pretty amazing. And over a century, and it was obviously very difficult for him. But besides that, he had been promised that the land of Israel would be his. And what happens when he wants a burial spot for his wife? He has to pay an enormous figure. So it's like, it could have been a crisis of faith. Hashem says it's all mine. When I just want a little piece, I have to spend a huge amount. What's going on here? And therefore, that was a big test, and that was Avram's final test. Now, I thought we could try to work out calculate how much money it would have costed approximately. But I'll work. Let's work it out, because the Torah says that Avram ended up having to pay 400 shekel. Okay, 400 shekel, and let's work out how much a shekel was worth at that time. Well, Yaakov buys a big piece of land in Shechem, right? After Yaakov, he had been working for his father-in-law for many years. And what happened from working from his father-in-law? He ended up, or doing business with his father-in-law, he ended up with a lot of money, but a difficult relationship with his father-in-law, okay? So this is something that can happen when you're working in the family. So he did well in the business, but it wasn't good for the relationship. And his father-in-law kept on tricking him. Lavan was known as a trickster. And he leaves and he goes back to Eretz Yisrael. He goes back to Israel, arrives in the outskirts of Shechem. So what does he do? He needs a place for him and his whole family. Okay, so him and his family, and he had servants, and he had a lot of possessions. He had animals and other possessions. He needed a huge piece of land. Okay, and how much does the piece of land cost? 100, somewhere, good Levi, yeah, 100 kasita. It costed 100 kasita. How much is a kasita compared to a shekel? 24 kasita is 1 shekel. Okay? So Yaakov buys this massive piece of land, an estate, for 4, because 24, so 24 times 4 is 96, a little bit over 4 shekel. 4 shekel and a sixth. Okay? Abraham buys a small plot of land just to bury his wife for 400 shekel. So let's just imagine, let's say Yaakov's land, it was on the outskirts of the city. Maybe it was farmland. Let's say he bought it for, we'll make it easy, $1 million in today's terms. So that would make Sarah's burial plot about $90 million. For her burial plot. It's like, what on earth? It's a crazy, ridiculous amount of money. But the truth is, it does still happen today. You know, if you imagine a burial spot in the middle of Manhattan.
Yeah, on the beach in Rose Bay.
In Rose Bay. Okay. It's probably expensive there too. Versus an entire ranch in, in Texas, or a huge piece of land in somewhere in the north of South Australia, or somewhere in the north of Western Australia or something. So you could end up paying more for a burial spot, especially when you're just letting them charge whatever they want to charge, compared to a huge piece of land, what Yaakov spent. Anyways, so he spends a fortune. Oopsie. And
can I say something?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, he didn't just buy the cave, did he? Bought the whole field that the cave was in.
Okay, true, but
still, even if it was a really big field, it's a lot of money, isn't it?
it doesn't seem like it was a big piece of land. From the Torah's description, it implies it's a small piece of land.
Yeah.
It certainly it wasn't anywhere near the size of what Yaakov got for less than 1/90th of what Avram spent.
Yeah, I imagine something like a 5-acre block.
Okay.
With a cave in the middle, you know.
Look, possibly
real estate's all about
huh?
Real estate's all about location, location, and location.
True. Yes. Yes, Yaakov was on the outskirts of Shechem, and this in Hebron, I suppose, although the Torah says that Hebron was not good land, but still, maybe it was expensive for burial, etc. It doesn't seem from the story that anyone except for Avram was aware that this is where Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were buried. If that was the case, if Ephron knew that, he would have brought that up and charged even more. Either way, so
right, that Ephraim offered for him to have it for free, and
well, sort of, but not exactly. It was he said it with the intention that it wouldn't be accepted. He said, you know, when you say I'm giving it to you, Ephron says 3 times I'm giving it to you, I'm giving it. When you want to do someone a favor, you don't focus on how kind you are and how much of a favor you're doing, right? Because someone says there are some people that they're very generous, but they keep on reminding you of how generous they are.
And what he actually gives is permission for Sarah to be buried in his cave, in his field. He's not actually selling any real estate.
Right, exactly, yes.
Yes,
exactly. Abraham asks, I was going to say that as well. Abraham asks for achuzah, he asks for a transfer of ownership, whereas what they say is you can bury your the one who passed away in your family in our quality, in our quality place of burial. But he's not, as David says, he's not giving it away. And besides that, like I was saying, they keep on stressing what a favor they're doing. Abraham doesn't want a favor, right? He says, I prefer to pay whatever the price is. I don't want you to claim ownership, and I don't want you to say this is all you're doing. Just sell it. I don't want any entanglements. And so that's what happens. Now, why does he spend so much is one question. The other question is, why does the Torah spend so much time describing the sale of the plot of land for Sarah to be buried? As you know, Rabbi, I want to quote Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory. He notes in I think more than one book that the Torah spends more time talking about how to build a home for Hashem in this world, how to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, than what the Torah spends describing how Hashem created this world. It's more important how we make this world Hashem's place than Hashem creating this world, the details of that. Because our job is bringing Hashem into here, not the focus on Hashem's creation. It's our mission is what's important. But here also we see the Torah spends more time talking about the negotiation for the burial spot of Sarah than the 10 Commandments. Why is this so important? What do you think? What's the lesson? What's it showing us?
Well, one thing is that there are 3 places that are purchased. We've mentioned 2 of them, Shechem and Hebron in Yerushalayim, with Dovid, on the basis that there should be no uncertainty that we own these places. And the 3 places key places which are subject to the most controversy these days as to whether we really do own it or not. So the Torah was definitely ahead of its time in realizing that these are the places we have to assert our ownership, and it was not going to be that easy. But also, it's showing us, obviously, Kavod HaMet in this particular case.
Right.
It's showing us the importance of finding the right place. It's not just, although on the other hand, when we get to Yaakov, Rachel gets buried seemingly just on the side of the road, and it takes some commentary to actually tell us, well, actually, this wasn't any road that the side of, and there's a key point to it here. But from the text, it just looks like what it was just the next available bit of dirt.
Right.
So you have to be careful on how
that's true. And Yaakov,
but certainly it's showing.
Right.
The story of Abraham and Yaakov, and Sarah, that's important where they're buried.
Right. Yaakov actually feels bad about where he buries his wife Rachel, and he apologizes to Yosef before he passes away. He says, "I'm sorry that I buried my dear wife, your mother, where I did." And he brings that up before he passes away. So there's definitely some unease there, but that itself, the unease, also shows that burial is important.
Yeah, he has to do that because there's potentially Yosef will object to why should I show care to you, Yaakov, where you're buried? Look what you did to my mother.
That's true.
Ha.
That's true.
So
that's true. But still, it shows that it's important. Now, this Ephron was not an easy person to deal with. Actually, the name Ephron is the same gematria, the same numerical value as Ra'ayin, which means someone who is stingy and jealous of others. And that's from the Baal HaTurim. The Kli Yakar takes it a step further. You know, numbers always have a lot of significance in the Torah. How much does Abraham pay? He pays 400 shekel. What's with this number 400? Where else do we find the number 400 in the Torah? This is a bit of a hard question, but we find it a few times. One of them is, and my kids, there's a song, one of the songs, the Parshat songs that they love is, Esav was coming with 400 men, right? So Esav attacks Yaakov. He's jealous of his brother Yaakov, and he approaches to attack with 400 men. So again, we see there's jealousy, and then 400. Just like here, we see Ephron wanting everything for himself, not being happy with other people's success, stinginess, and again we have 400. We also find 400. Right, exactly. That they're going to be in a land. The Abrahamic seed would be in a land which isn't theirs, a foreign land, for 400 years. How did that start? At least the main part of that, the bulk of that 400 years, the majority of it was in Egypt, and it started with Yosef's brothers being jealous of him. So again, we find this jealousy, this uncomfortableness with other people's success that relates to the number 400. We find it in Nach, we find it in later parts of the Jewish Bible as well. We find it that Dovid, King David, asks a wealthy man called Naval for support, right? This is when David is a fugitive, he's in trouble, and he asks him, please, we're hungry, give us food, look after us, please. And Naval says no. And David thinks, this wicked person, we're hungry, we need help, we're on the run, he won't feed us. And he marches towards Naval with 400, he's got 400 men there. And then Naval's wife, who is wiser and kinder than him, diffuses the situation, and she gives David all the food that they need and makes everyone happy. But there again, we have David coming with 400 men. Again, there's stinginess there. People don't want other people's success, uncomfortable with other success, and we have again the number 400. Okay.
I think a few chapters earlier than that, he's fleeing from King Saul, and he also, I think, there has 400 men in a cave near Adullam, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so there also we have Shaul jealous of David's popularity. We have the same idea as well.
And in Ezra, there's a rededication with 400 lambs.
Okay, you're keeping me on my toes. We'll have to look in the Kliyaka and try to work it out.
So there's quite a few. Didn't Jezebel have 400 false prophets?
Yes, yeah.
To meet,
well, that one can fit in quite easily.
Sorry?
That one can fit in quite easily.
Oh, yeah. 400,000 at Mitzpah after the Binyamin, the Pilegesh Binyamin. 400,000 turn up.
Look, again, that also, it's a civil war. It's brothers fighting each other.
Yeah, there's another 400 in that story as well, but I won't keep you.
Okay, no, it's you know Tanakh well. Okay, so what do we come to from all of this? We come to that no matter the price, Avram is ready to pay it in order to bury Sarah in a respectable place. Why are we doing this? What is the concept of respect for the body? There's a number of concepts here. One is the body housed the neshama, the soul. So if you have even a vessel that is holding something holy, then the vessel itself becomes holy. We find this with for example, let's say a mezuzah case. So because it's used to hold a mezuzah, it takes some of the holiness. Certainly with the Torah scroll of Sefer Torah, that the mantle, the cover for the Torah, assumes holiness, and it's a high level of holiness in halacha. Now, so that's one aspect. The body housed the holy neshama. Another aspect, we use the body for many mitzvot. We used it for many good deeds, many of Hashem's commandments, and therefore the body becomes holy. By the way, this is a topic my wife likes to teach. She's teaching in high school, and some people, have a negative image of their body, and it's important to sort of realize and to take in this idea that we consider the body holy, and the body it's holy and it's good, and that's how we've got to look at it, and that's important. Besides that, the body is in itself Tselem Elokim. It is in the image of Hashem. That's not only the soul. Some explain what is in the image of Hashem. It's the soul or the mind or free choice. There's different interpretations, consciousness, spirituality, but it's not only that, it's also the body itself. And in Kabbalah, it takes it to the extent, if you've seen any of these, the Kabbalistic, diagrams with the triangles, yes, you've got the dot at the top and then two dots and then one dot and then two dots, one dot, etc. Like sort of triangles. So that those shapes relate to different parts of the body. So you start off, you've got the skull and then the right and left brain. Then it gets narrow, then it goes down through the neck, and then you have the right and left arms or chest, etc., and it goes through the body, which represents the idea that every part of the body also represents a certain quality and relates to the 10 Sefirot. Okay, now there's more than that too. One of the core ideas of Judaism, and this is somewhere where Judaism is different to many of the other religions, is in the idea that we don't run away from the physical, but the physical becomes holy, right? So if we would look at our body as sort of an annoyance, I wish I didn't have a body and then my soul can fly high, then we want to drop it. But if we say, no, we're not trying to escape the world, we're trying to make the world holy. And the physical
likewise with people who got straight hair and they say, oh, if only I had curly hair. And then you got people with curly hair and they say, if only I had straight hair. You know, rather than being grateful for what Hashem gave you.
Right. Yes, exactly. And if we broaden that concept even to the whole fact that we're physical beings, we're not angels, but that's actually good. We don't say, oh, why do I have to eat? Why do I have to sleep? I could soar if I didn't have to. No, it's good to be in this world and part of it. And that's part of our mission and part of what makes humans so special. We're able to bridge those gaps. So that's another reason that the body is so special and why we have to honor it with a dignified burial. Now, there's another aspect here too, which is a final aspect, which is the concept of Tchiyat HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, which is one of the core prophecies that will happen after Mashiach comes, and burial affirms our belief in that concept, whereas destroying the body, like cremation, sort of says that this is all over. We say, no, the body is coming back. And you know what? I want to tell you, first, the truth is, I don't really find miracles too hard to believe in, because I think creation from nothing to something was the biggest miracle of all. But if you have trouble, we're almost at a stage where scientifically they can do Tchiyat HaMesim. Okay? So if we don't reach it, God will be able to do it. Take the DNA, rebuild a body, we're almost there. So certainly God can do it without any trouble. Either way, but the burial affirms our belief in Tchiyat HaMesim. Now, unfortunately now, it's becoming increasingly common for people to cremate rather than bury. And it's important that when we can, with people we're close to, or just in general, if you talk about a topic without making it personal, it can also influence someone. We've got to talk about burial, how it's a great Jewish value, burial, not cremation. And we don't want to wait till the last minute, because when the family's grieving, they don't want to hear, and they might already have instruction, and it's very hard to change their minds. So I thought we'll share a few arguments that people use for cremation and some responses. Some of this is from Daron Kornbluth, who wrote a book about this. So some people say, well, why should I be buried rather than cremate? There's no one who's going to visit me anyway. Either, don't have any, family or any people close to me who would visit, or they live overseas, whatever the case is. So that's one. We mentioned before Moshe Rabbeinu's burial. Moshe was buried in such a way that no one knew where he was buried. So have we been visiting Moshe's grave? No. But so what? The Torah still discusses his burial. Burial is important, and respect to the person regardless of visitors. People sometimes talk about it, that we're going to fill up the whole world with graves, or environmental reasons. So someone actually made a study and said that this was a study in America, that it would take 10,000 years of everyone getting buried to use up 1% of America. Okay? So I don't think we have to worry. In Israel, they're already doing deep excavations in order to have slots and more people being buried. But I don't think we have to worry. The vast majority of the world, in other words, more than 99% of the world is not cities. It's the vast majority is there's a lot of space. Besides that, about environmentalism, actually the best way to dispose of a body is burial. So it's far better for the environment than cremation. The reason that burial is often, they complain about it is because many burials, they use metal coffins and they use a lot of chemicals to embalm the body. But if that's not used, the Jewish burial, without the chemicals, without the metal, just a simple pine casket, a wooden casket. So that is actually the most environmentally friendly way for a corpse. In Sweden, which is a very secular country and a lot of cremation. So actually it's according to some studies, almost a third of the mercury in the air in Sweden comes from cremation. Another reason people bring up is that it just, if they visualize what happens to the body after it's buried and how it decomposes, it's not pleasant. But the other option also is certainly not pleasant, visualizing cremation. In terms of the cost, it is true that it costs more, but there are funds, and if someone or a family were in need, then certainly they would be able to get support to make it cheaper and on par. And I've been involved, not in a heavy way, but I've been involved in several cases with this where people fundraised for a burial. Perhaps just to end with anyone want to point anything out or questions, or should I maybe or just end with the story? You
mentioned.
Hello. Yeah, go for it.
No, you mentioned at the beginning that a levaya can be delayed for family to get there. I've never thought it was quite that straightforward.
It's not straightforward.
That one should wait. I have a halacha lemasa here too, because my father passed away on a Thursday in the UK, and realistically, I wouldn't have been able to couldn't get there until the Sunday night because of Shabbos, which would make the levaya on Monday. And I asked my father's rabbi on the phone that night when we heard that he'd passed away. I said to him, which would be more covered to the mace? Is it more covered that we bury him straight away, or is it more covered that you wait for me to get there? And I'll abide by whatever your psak is. He said that was a very difficult question, and he didn't want to answer it, and he passed it on to Diane Gelly of the London based in.
Sorry, Diane who?
Came back to me. Diane Gelly, Gelly. He took over from Diane Erventra, who actually needs a refush lima at the moment. So he was Roche based in of London based in. So he came back and said that it might. I explained to him my relationship with father. He said your father would have wanted you to be there. He gave two reasons why I should be there, which I was. One was that my father would be there, and therefore it was more covered I should be there. And the other was that it would be a delay of maximum of 3 days, which general custom and practice in the UK is to wait up to 3 days, apparently, for people to arrive, but no more than that. As it turns out, there were extreme complications with actually getting permission for the levaya, and whether I'd been going there or not, it wouldn't have happened until the Monday anyway. We buried him in the end without a death certificate, special permission from the coroner's office because of the circumstances. So actually, I didn't delay there, as it turns out, but I thought it was interesting because I don't generally hear of Pesach on this subject. It always seems to me it's not a trivial question as to whether family or one shouldn't, and obviously it's a very delicate emotional matter as well.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't saying that then that it should be delayed. I'm saying that then it wouldn't be a prohibition of this mitzvah, and it has to be evaluated. I know people, and I have a friend who was in the similar situation, and the burial went ahead without him. But
and now
so it is a
you have no option.
Right. Okay. Just to conclude with the story, there was a fellow Jewish man who survived the Holocaust with his son. His wife was killed by the Nazis. After the war, he ended up in America. His son later made Aliyah. His son moved to Israel, and over there he re-embraced his heritage and became an observant Jew. Meanwhile, the father and son, they're not, they're living in different countries, different continents, different types of lives. They're not in such regular contact, but the father gets remarried, and his second wife is not Jewish, and he has another son. Many years later, the father passes away. The family in America contact the son in Israel and say, unfortunately, your father's just passed away. And I don't know if the son actually was aware. The son went back and he says he's coming back to America and we have to arrange a burial. They said, well, actually, he's agreed to a cremation next to his, and he'll be buried. The ashes will be put next to his wife, his second wife, who already passed away, and it was going to be a Christian burial, not burial, but in a Christian cemetery. And he says to his half brother, it's very important for me. Our father was Jewish. He has to have a Jewish burial. The son says, no, I'm not. I want him to be next to my mother. And anyway, that was his instructions. He says, I'll pay $50,000 for a Jewish burial. The son says, no. Now, actually, his father, without his in later years, had become very wealthy. The inheritance was $25 million. Okay? The son says, if I get the whole inheritance, then I accept. The Jewish son says to his brother, he consults with the rabbi. The rabbi says, yes. At the end, the son agrees that he gives up. He signs off the entire inheritance, $25 million, and the father has a Jewish burial. Now, this story has been discussed and debated. Maybe we'll discuss it again another time. But either way, certainly we see this concept of the value and importance of having a Jewish burial. Anyway, may we all have long, healthy years. It should be entirely theoretical and academic. But either way, maybe, we'll talk to someone. You might change someone's mind. If you change one person's mind about this, it's a big mitzvah, So it is an important topic. But in the meantime, what do we know? We have to know that our bodies are special. Our bodies are holy. The live body even more so. So that's the lesson for us in the meantime. Our bodies are holy. Our bodies are good. They're full of mitzvahs. And that's the image we should have of it. And just every opportunity, when we do a mitzvah, we add holiness and good to our body. So let's jump at the chance.